Hi, I'm Dr. Julie Nelson, and I am a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine here at Chi Integrated Health in Vancouver, BC. And today we're going to continue our discussion on how to heal from trauma. And if you find these videos interesting and helpful, please consider subscribing by hitting the red button below. So, as a doctor of Chinese medicine, I treat a lot of patients whose health issues are a direct result of emotional and physical trauma. And in our previous episode, I discussed the importance of feeling safe and loved as two key factors in overcoming traumatic incidences. So, today, though, we're going to talk about more specific examples of patients that I've treated. And one of the most important, or one of the things that I find in clinic is people who have grown up in traumatic environments. Like, so people that have had abusive childhoods, places where their parents were typically the abusers and the root of their trauma. This type of trauma is more difficult to heal from because knowing how you feel and being able to name your emotions, being in touch with your body is something that traumatized people cannot do. And if we don't know what we feel, we won't be able to understand why we feel that way. This sensory information gets blocked by trauma. Traumatized people feel chronically unsafe in their bodies. They process life through their traumatized experiences, and they're constantly waging a war, an emotional and internal defensive dialogue. And the problem is it's not rational or intelligent thought. It is emotional fear, and it's very reactionary. And according to Bessel van Der Kolk, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, page 66, if you want to go deeper, disassociation is the essence of trauma. The overwhelming experiences split off and get fragmented so that the emotions, sounds, and images, thoughts, and physical sensations related to trauma take on a life of their own. These sensory fragments of memory intrude into the present where they're literally relived. So as long as trauma is not resolved, these stress hormones that the body secretes to protect itself keep circulating, and the defensive movements and emotional responses keep getting replayed. We will unconsciously continue to create situations that mimic our emotional trauma. So I just want to give an example here. So 2 weeks ago, I had a patient come to see me. She's a 40-year-old single mom, and she came in because she had low back pain, sciatica. So bulging discs. Probably the root of the problem was basically impinging on the sciatic nerve and causing this sharp stabbing pain. It was referring down her legs. And so she'd been to see practitioners and was looking for acupuncture to provide some more relief. So great, no problem, we're talking about it. But I also do a complete health history. So as we're going through, okay, so here's the root problem, here's what's going on. We do a health intake. And so what also came out is that she's suffering from irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, migraines, eye infections, and burning tongue. Now, at this point, when we get to more than 3 things, I tend to go, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so I just said, hey, just out of curiosity, any history of trauma, anything going on, any past? And she stopped, and the tears started coming, just started flowing. And she quietly said that she had been in a physically abusive marriage. She was out of it now, but it was very physically abusive. And so here we are. The trauma happened. It's in her body. Why? Because we're seeing migraines, irritable bowel syndrome, burning tongue. There's no cure for burning tongue. And it's a direct result of having stored all of that trauma. So when that happens, she just wasn't connected to her feelings. Like there was no path out for her to express herself. So I treated her face down. We did what we would normally do for back sciatica and things like that, did healing touch. And when she got up off the table, she was very calm, sad, but calm. And so I said, look, I want to see you again next week, which is typically what I do. I will treat people once a week and have them come back for follow-up. So she came back in this week, and I'm like, how are you doing? And she's like, well, she said it was really interesting. When I got up off the table, I felt better. I felt calmer. She said, but when I got home, the heat started coming. I released so much heat out of my body. I was sweating. I was having hot flashes. I felt so sad and just cried pretty well most of the weekend. And so all of that emotion had been pent up in her body, and now it was able to come out. She had found a path out to express herself through a safe environment. The body just sort of went, okay, it's coming out. And that's what acupuncture is. It's an up and out treatment. And for her, being able to talk about her pain, both physical and emotional, is the beginning of her healing process. So many people aren't aware of the connection between their feelings and overreactions, and they may have feelings of intense rage or jealousy, those types of things. So those events get played out over and over again. But what happens, though, is your body quietly holds on to that trauma. And that's what was happening for her. Like burning tongue is, where does that come from? Migraines and IBS can all be linked back to trauma. So, and the other thing with trauma is I call it a sneaky foe, because if we're not aware of our trauma, we will unconsciously choose our abuser. And so if we've had abusive parents, now the great thing is with this particular patient, she was not in another abusive relationship, and she hadn't had an abusive childhood. She grew up in a very happy family. And so the great thing is her trauma, it has basically a beginning and an end. And for her, I recommended EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so that is a form of psychotherapy whereby the therapist, not me, I'm not qualified, will take the patient into the traumatic event. They will have them verbally explain what happened and feel it in their body, feel the breathing. And then as the patient comes out of describing what happened, the therapist will then have the patient follow their fingers back and forth in front of their face, and that reprograms and remaps the brain. This is a great form of healing for people, or I should say therapy, for people who've had traumatic events. So the big thing is, first, we need to feel safe. We need to get to safe. We need to feel safe. And only when we feel safe can we get out of an emotional reactionary mode and into more rational mode. You're able to talk about it. And how do we do this? We have therapy. So when people are in a flight mode or reactionary mode, there's the bottom up and the top down. And the bottom up basically is massage, it's acupuncture, it's healing touch, it's actual physical touch. Healthy, safe physical touch can ground us back into our bodies. Once we feel safe, then we can do what we call the top-down therapy, which is the cognitive, which is the EMDRs, which is the cognitive behavior therapy, those types of things. And so the two tend to work really nicely together. So as people are working through their experiences and this, it's not enough to do one. You probably need to build out a support team and a support network of practitioners that you trust, that you feel safe with, that hold this space for you, that are able to listen to what's going on in your body. So I tend to work with, I kind of straddle a little bit. So I work with the physical aspect, the gut, digestion, insomnia, migraines, that type of thing. And just by listening to that, it gets people to safe. And then we do the needles and we do the behavior, the healing touch. And then I will refer them out to practitioners who specialize in counseling, because this is as far as I go. But often people come in and they just don't know where to start. And so that's what we do. That's what I do here at She Integrated Health. So what else do I want to say? Here's the other thing that I want to talk about. So as I said earlier, it's really important to know what we feel. That's the first step, and knowing why we feel that way. And we have to be aware of constant changes in our inner and outer environments, and then we can manage them, right? So our gut feelings really signal what is safe to us. They evaluate what's going on around us. And if you trust your gut to give you accurate information, you will feel like you're in charge of your situation, what's going on. And in my video prior to this one, I talked about a term called agency. And agency is a term that we use for feeling in charge of your life. It's knowing where you stand and having a say in what happens to you, and knowing that you have the ability to shape your circumstances. Agency requires self-awareness, courage, and confidence to act on it. And if we've been in traumatic situations, especially as children, we do not have agency. We do not have it. We are often at the mercy of our abuser. And so we typically earn the terms like pleaser, people pleaser. She gets really quiet. She doesn't say anything. People who don't have agency will often be victimized or find themselves in abusive relationships again and again and again. Why? Because they didn't have their boundaries respected when they were younger. They weren't able to speak up and articulate what they needed. If they tried to, those needs were often ignored or overrode, or they were responded to with violence. So agency is being in charge of your life and knowing where you stand and having a say in that. And as I say, unfortunately for traumatized people, they just didn't have this. And also for traumatized people, their responses to stress took on a more physical form. So I often see migraine, headaches, asthma attacks, chronic back pain, neck pain. I see this time and time again with people who have come from traumatized environments. So, and we also store those emotions in our body, and they will come out in a physical form. So it's not until I do a timeline that we find out that the culprit was actually trauma. What was going on when you got sick? What was happening in your life? What was your childhood like? And as I said earlier, a body in balance does not get sick. So when we are in balance, when we've had healthy relationships, when we were supported and loved, we don't get the type of trauma illnesses that I see. So we need to feel our emotions, we need to name them, and we need to know where we're storing that emotion in our body. In our next episode, we're going to start to look at ways, how do we get regulated after we've been triggered? So for traumatized people, they tend to stay in fight, flight, or freeze. And if you don't have an acupuncturist nearby or a massage therapist or something's going on, we do have tools to cope with that will bring us back to ourselves and get us grounded so that we can start to name our emotions and move forward and not get stuck in these emotional triggered responses. I'm Dr. Julie Nelson, and thank you very much for watching.